Hello. Today I'm going to talk about supply and demand. And supply and demand really forms the foundation of the price system. Supply and demand will help us interpret equilibrium prices, and from those equilibrium prices, we can discern the quantity that's traded and the price at which goods and services are traded. There's an interesting history to supply and demand analysis. Most of this comes from the work of Alfred Marshall. He was an eminent British economist that wrote in 1890 or around the late part of the 19th century. And in those 125 years, the foundation that Marshall set has really been the standard for how price theory is done and how the modern economist interprets the price mechanism. Well, why is price so important? Well, we think that prices give consumers and producers a lot of information, and we think that prices really influence the amount that consumers buy and the amount that producers bring to market. So we want to know how prices are set to better understand that driving force in market economics. First of all, let's talk a bit about labeling the axes on the standard supply and demand matrix. The downward sloping demand curve has price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis, and that downward sloping demand curve indicates that there's a negative relationship between price and quantity. That relationship is so fixed and so commonly observed that we call it the law of demand. And basically it says that when prices fall, consumers take a higher quantity, and when prices rise, people get discouraged and take fewer units. The second pillar of the demand apparatus is the quantity axis, and that's what we put on the horizontal label. So we're looking at this two-dimensional graph that shows price on the vertical and quantity on the horizontal. Demand is downward sloping, supply is the other piece of that curve, or the other curve that goes into that mechanism, and that's the upward sloping curve that shows what producers respond to. And they also respond to prices, but they respond differently than consumers do. Namely, the producer wants to sell his good or service for the highest price he can fetch, and that means that when prices go up, they bring more to market, and when prices fall, they bring less to market. So if we mix these two forces together, we take the demanders on one side, the suppliers on the other, we can merge them together, and it forms a nice clear X, and where that X intersects is an important part of our analysis. That's the equilibrium point, and that equilibrium point shows the amount traded and also what we call the market clearing price. And the market clearing price is the single price that all trades occur at. And interestingly, if you think about it, most goods trade at just a single price. If we're selling milk, it's all sells for the same price. If we're buying milk, everyone gets to buy it at the same price. Same with a pair of shoes, same with a gallon of gasoline. Everyone that trades in that market operates at the same price. So that's important for us because it motivates our behavior, both as buyers and sellers, and it gives us a lot of information as to what is scarce in an economy and what's abundant. Another feature of the supply and demand apparatus that's absolutely vital is understanding the difference between a shift of a demand curve or a supply curve and a movement on those curves. When I was a first-time economics student, I can remember my professor talking about making a big deal out of shifts and distinguishing that from movements on a curve. And I couldn't really understand what all the fuss was about. It didn't seem to me at the time to be such a big deal. But now, many years later, I realize that that's really an essential part of understanding supply and demand relationships. A movement on a curve just means that prices change. So if we move along a demand curve, if we move down the demand curve, it means the price has fallen, so quantity demanded goes up. That sort of stands to reason. We see prices fall and consumers react positively by taking a higher quantity. On the other hand, price goes up. How do consumers respond? Again, according to the law of demand, they take fewer units. So that's the change in quantity demanded. A counterpart to that is a change in demand. And a change in demand means that the entire curve shifted. And if it shifts outward, we call that an increase in demand. And if it shifts leftward, we call that a decrease in demand. And that tells us a different story. That tells us that something non-price happened. It could have been a change in income. It could have been a change in tastes. It could have been a change in taxes. It could have been a change in another product's price. But whatever the cause, it wasn't a change in the own price, in the price of the good that we're talking about. It was a change in some other thing that impinged upon that market. So, for example, if my income goes up, I might buy more gasoline. It had nothing to do with the price of gasoline today, but it had everything to do with my income changing and making gas relatively more affordable to me. Finally, today I want to talk a little bit about the supply curve and how it connects to the demand curve. Again, on the supply side, we have shifts and movements just identical to what I just talked about. On the other hand, producers are motivated by just the opposite relationship with price. Namely, when prices go up, producers supply a bigger quantity, and when prices go down, quantity falls. What causes supply curves to shift outward? Well, something favorable to the firm. That could be lower taxes, that could be decreased resource prices, maybe a more favorable tax environment. But when the supply curve shifts outward, something favorable happened to the firm. So as you're thinking about supply and demand mechanisms in the supply and demand apparatus, make sure you first distinguish that notion of, was this change caused by something having to do with the price, or did it not involve price? Did it involve something else that was important to this particular market? And once you can disentangle those, you can further appreciate, and you'll have the mechanics of the supply and demand apparatus much more readily available to you.